What is everybody? Welcome to the BamaInsider YouTube channel, hanging out with Clint Lamb and company tonight. It's Monday Night Quarterback, and it's presented by Westgate Luxury Condominiums. As you hang out with us on the site, I'm going to say this over and over and over again tonight. Like and subscribe. Give us a thumbs up. That's a way of saying roll tide. Hit the bell so you know when we're live. We got so much to talk about on the show. We'll talk with Jimmy Stein later on in the program. I call him the dean of BamaInsider. He's been covering the Crimson Tide and watching games for a long, long time. Joseph Hastings will be on to give us an update on recruiting. Alabama doing really well in that category. And there he is right there, our good friend Clint Lamb. So much going on, dude. I mean, like literally moments ago, just huge breaking news. The transfer portal, before everyone's alarmed, hey, this is college football across the board, but Alabama losing some big-time players, including Cohen, there's a starting offensive lineman, and now three more guys just announced.
Yeah, it was about, 10 minutes before we were supposed to hop on here, and news broke, which we knew was coming. So luckily, stories were already ready to rock. I just had to get it out to social media. But Amari Kite and Tommy Brockermeyer, and then also JoJo Earl. So if you're looking at the main two positions that have been, I guess you would call it depleted in the transfer portal, offensive line and at wide receiver, because you got Christian Leary, you got Trayshawn Holden, you got JoJo Earl. All three of those guys at receiver, at least two contributors in Holden and Earl. And then on the offensive line, you got Javian Cohen, like you mentioned, Tommy Brockermeyer, Amari Kite, and then you also got Damian George, who, started a few games last year. So you've got a starter, you've got another guy who had played some in Amari Kite, who, backup left tackle. You got Damian George, who had seen some snaps at guard and at tackle and practicing games. So quite a bit of turnover. And when you combine that, receiver, you're not really losing a whole lot outside of the transfer portal. Like there's not, Jermaine Burton might go to the NFL, but, I guess we'll have to wait and see on that front. But Tyler Steen, Darian Dalcourt.
He might try to go to the NFL.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I mean, you got, I think he needs to as well for sure. So you got Tyler Steen, you got Emil Ekiyor, you got Darian Dalcourt, and then you got those four offensive linemen who are already or are going to be entering the transfer portal. I think Alabama had 15 scholarship offensive linemen this year, and 7 or 8 of those are now going to be gone. So that's right around half. They do have 5 commitments in the 2023 recruiting class. Joseph can talk about that more. But, it's quite a bit of attrition.
Well, look, those have been the two most disappointing areas on this football team. And I think that part of this is you're going to have to rebuild those spots anyway, right? I mean, and Alabama's probably going to attack the transfer portal like they attack recruiting this year. I mean, that's just kind of my opinion. I mean, if I'm Nick Saban, right?
Well, what's interesting is that I already felt like the wide receiver was pretty crowded. I feel like they used too many guys at that position this year. Sometimes you just got to let guys develop and get out there and get a chemistry. And we've talked about that on the show quite a bit. When you've got 7 or 8 or 9 guys all rotating, it's very difficult for a quarterback to get really good chemistry with any one player or any 1 or 2 players or 3 players. So I think that they needed to condense who was actually playing.
Right.
You got a contributor in Earl leaving. You got a contributor in Holden leaving. We'll see what happens with Burton, but you got Malik Benson coming in, a JUCO guy who I think, alleviates the need to go to the transfer portal to add somebody. They very well might. That Missouri receiver, I forget his name, but he's a heck of a player. I went and watched some tape on him just a little bit ago. Think he could certainly help Alabama if they wanted to go that route. There are some other guys who could help. But, it's the offensive line to me. What people's got to understand, with Javian Cohen and some of these guys, sometimes it's just not the right fit, right? So, I mean, he's got starting experience. That's huge. He's a good player. But, I think that right now Alabama's wanting to kind of hit the reset button on some things and just make sure that their culture's, continuing to head in the right direction, not the wrong direction. Not that, Javian Cohen had anything to do with it being in the wrong place or anything. I'm just saying some of this turnover that's happening, the coaching staff is completely fine with it. And so I don't think fans need to be freaking out. There's been nobody that has announced that I think, I look at it and I say, wow, that's a huge one. Now, granted, I wasn't overly concerned about Drew Sanders last year, and that ended up being a pretty big loss. So, we'll have to wait and see how things turn out. But there's nothing on paper right now that says, oh, man, this is a huge problem. Like you said, this is something that everybody's dealing with.
Yeah, right. And I mean, I wonder how many of these guys that are leaving are being told, hey, man, you know what? You may want to go find something else. I don't think Cohen's one of those guys, though. I was really surprised when I saw his name come up, but I'm not behind the scenes. I don't know. Now, I think that Alabama and Nick Saban really need to get back to being Alabama, and he needs to get back to being Nick Saban. And, I stole this line from someone else, but Alabama's got to get back to making their asses quit, quote unquote, right? That's what I feel like's missing when I look at this program right now. And it may be tough with NIL and transfer portal, but Kirby Smart's figuring out a way to do it.
Well, you got to have dogs, Mick. If you want that mentality, you got to have guys who are 110% about football, guys who want to go out there and do it every day. Kind of just take this approach of, when I step on a football field, I don't want to be liked out here. You're kind of okay with making enemies, between the lines. And I think that Alabama has a lot of that in some of the guys that are sticking around. J.C. Latham has a lot of that. Tyler Booker certainly has a lot of it. I think Elijah Pritchett, who was a 5-star player or borderline 5-star player who, tore his pec and wasn't able to participate much this season, he's got a lot of that in him, and I would fully expect him to push for a starting job in the spring. We'll see if that ends up happening, but that's what I would, expect going in. And then you've got just a great group, not from a star standpoint. You look at some of these past Alabama offensive line hauls, and it's been like 4- and 5-star guys across the board, and just incredible. And right now, there's only one top 100 offensive lineman committed. There's another guy who's committed in that 120 to 130 range. And then from there, it's, for lower 4 stars, 3-star guys. But you know what? I think it's the type of offensive lineman that Alabama is targeting right now. Like they don't care about the star ranking. They don't care how it looks, on these rankings, recruiting rankings. They want to get the right players with the right mentality in there. And sometimes if you got a 3-star guy, you need a 3-star mentality. That's going to be a guy that plays with a chip on his shoulder. And so I think they like the group they're bringing in. They're a bunch of big, physical, nasty football players.
Yeah.
And I think that that's kind of the identity of this offensive line moving forward.
Yeah, look, I agree with you. I think that's exactly what we're looking at right now. They're trying to get Andre the Giant, Bam Bam Bigelow, Big John Stud, King Kong Bundy, Vader, get them all up there, just maul people at the line of scrimmage, kind of what we used to see with Alabama. The last 2 years, the offensive line, I think this year was better than last year, other than Evan Neal a year ago. But it still wasn't something that you could really hang your hat on, and that could be the case right there. It is odd that those are the two areas that we've been talking about all year long where they let the team down. I mean, they've been the weak link in the chain. And then there's a bunch of exodus in those areas. Hey, guys, as you hang out with us on the Bama Insider YouTube channel, love seeing you guys in the comments section. Even the troll from Tennessee or whatever he's on here, like all you guys, man, thank you for being part of the show and hanging out with us. Don't forget to follow Clint on Twitter at Clint R. Lamb. And how about me? How about give me a at Broadcaster Mick? The local radio station called me a clown today because I say that I think Alabama's the second best team in the country because us people that bet know that Alabama statistically is going to be favored against everyone except Georgia. And that includes 3 teams in the college football playoff. We could talk about that a little later, but we're kind of talking about the transfer portal because all of that has broken. And I want to ask your opinion, Clint, on like opt-outs with the bowl game coming up. And I thought a lot about this today because I was asked that, a few times on different radio interviews. And I said, hey, look, I expect Bryce Young and Will Anderson to opt out. Then it dawned on me, that they shouldn't opt out because they're being paid to play football at Alabama, especially Bryce Young. He's on TV more than any Major League Baseball player. Like he is. I see him on Dr. Pepper commercials. Is he on subways here and there? Look, he's really paid to play football at Alabama.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point. That's something that I hadn't really thought about. You're right. Is he paid to go play in a bowl game, or is he paid to go try to help them win championships? I guess that would be, kind of, and now that they're not competing for a championship, how important is it to the people that are paying him for him to, play in this football game? It might be. I don't know the intricate details of what is expected on that front, but I do know that, injuries are taken into consideration. You would like to think that all of them could make it through the game without getting hurt or with any sort of significant injury. What would it do to Bryce Young if he were to fall on that shoulder wrong and re-injure it? Now he can't go through the draft, off-season circuit stuff, all the combine and pro day and throwing for teams. Could that cost him from potentially being the number 1 overall pick? Just how much could it possibly hurt him? He's kind of looked at as, even though he's been very durable outside of that shoulder injury for whatever reason, and it's because of his size. I say for whatever reason. I mean, we know what it is, but I would say that there are a lot bigger players who have a lot bigger concerns when it comes to, reoccurring injuries than Bryce. But if he re-hurts it in the bowl game, I mean, now you're really talking about, is this guy going to be able to hold up and how he would be viewed? And I think from a fan's perspective, you want to win this football game. You want to prove, hey, we were one of the 4 best teams in the country. We're going to try to beat up on a Kansas State team that beat TCU. That would be a great statement for them to make. At the same time, though, from a fan's perspective, if you got to go ahead and get a look at, a Jalen Milroe or a Ty Simpson, if you were to get a look at some of these, other guys, how is, you might even end up seeing some players that you really haven't seen a whole lot of, like Amari Nablack, the 5-star tight end who really hadn't played a ton, but he's played a little bit. Who knows? With Cameron Latou could end up sitting out. I doubt that he does, but if he did, you might see some Robbie Utes and Amari Nablack and see what that 1-2 punch is going to look like in the future. There's just so many different possibilities where I think that there's pluses and minuses to both situations. But yeah, you're right. I mean, they are getting paid to play football.
This isn't Tyrone Prothro, who got injured playing football, not in a bowl game, was a guy that would have made millions of dollars, and he didn't make any money, right? These are guys that are, particularly Bryce Young, who is one of my favorite all-time Alabama players, just throw that out there too. I mean, he's been just incredible on and off the field. But at the same time, he's paid, and I mean, I get it. Like, the NFL's there, but you know what? What I see is, well, first off, just kind of taking what Nick Saban said yesterday, in the Sugar Bowl press conference. What's this team's identity going to be? How are they going to leave the program? And this is 2010 Alabama. They had all of the talent in the world, and they didn't get there. But you know what that team in 2010 did, and you and I have talked about this before, they curb stomped Michigan State, and that set up the 2-year run to back-to-back championships, right? So, I mean, I still do think it's important that you go into this bowl game and you look at it as a Sugar Bowl championship isn't going to get you a ring at Alabama. At Tennessee, it would, but at Alabama, it won't. You got to win a real championship. And I get that. I mean, that's just the way it is. Okay. But at the same time, I think this is a really important time for Alabama to finish up this season strong. I mean, and I just don't know if you don't have Bryce Young and Will Anderson, all these guys opt out, which could happen. We haven't seen that at Alabama yet, but it could happen. It could spell trouble for the Crimson Tide down the road, Clint. I mean, I just feel that way.
Well, and one thing about it, we talk about, and I will say that I feel like that in the Iron Bowl, Nick Saban, really not just Nick Saban, I think it was the entire staff, you saw them trying new things.
Yes.
And part of me, thinks that is them trying to win a football game. Certainly. There's another part of me that thinks, okay, they were in their minds at the time, a lot had to happen for them to get back in the college football playoff conversation. They were looking at that and saying, our season's pretty much over. And so we can, tweak some things and try some things out and kind of tinker and see what works and what doesn't work in a live game situation. Get Robbie Utes some more reps at tight end, let him block out on the perimeter, see how he does, see how he's improved. So you might see some of that. But at the same time, I also think that, Nick Saban, anytime he steps on the football field, he wants his team to not look at what the circumstances are. Every snap, every, quarter, every game that you participate in, you're trying to get better. And so is it the right mentality to kind of say, well, this game really doesn't matter, so let's go out there and try a bunch of different things that we wouldn't have tried otherwise? Like I said, there's different ways of looking at it. And I don't know which way, some of the players are going to look at it. I don't know how the coaching staff is going to view it. I do like what they did in the Iron Bowl, and I would like to see a lot more of that. I think that would be very encouraging. But, we'll kind of just have to wait and see how it goes. But you raised some great points. I don't necessarily disagree with you. I just think there's also some other angles to look at it as well.
Yeah, right. No, well, I appreciate that. All right, one last thing before we talk recruiting with Joseph Hastings, and I guess this is kind of just the final thought on being left out of the college football playoff. You and I talked about it yesterday, ad nauseum, and kind of having a day to reflect on, Alabama being left out. They're one of the 4 best teams, but the knock against them is that they didn't earn it. The other teams earned it, right? TCU lost in overtime, and then despite the fact that Ohio State looked a lot like LSU, getting just beaten around the field in their games, their last games, they're in, right? And Alabama's left out. I just really felt like that Alabama's 2 losses, I mean, as crazy and last second and dramatic as they were held against them at a higher standard than, Ohio State getting bludgeoned by Michigan on their home field, right? And I wonder if moving forward, if that's kind of the trend that we're going to see now, or is this just because people are sick of seeing Alabama win national championships?
Man, that's a great question. And part of me thinks that it's really part of me, I don't know, man, this is a tough question to answer, because there's a part of me that thinks that the committee looks at this and they chalk it up to 2 losses. That's it. Like, hey, 2-loss team, not happening. They don't put much effort into it. And there's another part of me that thinks that they go and dive in and, they really try to justify, it's almost like, I have a problem with, I understand that Ohio State won a lot of their games, pretty much every other one of their games by double-digit points. The problem that I have with it is that if you actually watch them in a lot of those games, they really struggled and they didn't look great. And then something happened right there at the end and they pull away. So there was this huge talking point. Hey, they won all their other games by double digits. That's impressive. I mean, watch the games, right? And I don't feel like enough people do that. Like, I'd really try every weekend on Sundays. I spend a lot of it going back and watching. And just to me, Alabama did feel like, one of the 4 best teams in the country. I don't know what the reasoning was, if they're purposefully trying to hold Alabama out, or, if they realized, hey, once we reach a 12-team playoff, there might never be another playoff that doesn't include Alabama. So while we got the chance, let's, see some other 4 teams in there. I don't know what the reasoning was.
They just don't want to see look. It'll all be when TCU loses by 21 and then Michigan loses by 21 and no one comes close to beating Georgia, they'll know. But they probably won't care. They just don't want to see Alabama win another one. But I got to say this, and I said one more question, but I lied, and that's because of you, Elizabeth. Big time Roll Tide to you, man. This is I don't remember getting many $100 super chats. So a huge Roll Tide right back at you. Says this is her first time. So wanted to ask a question. Thoughts on Milroe? His tendency to take off running concerns me. Okay, I'm going to go first, Clint, and then Clint's the professional. So I want him to I'll go first, and then I'll let Clint finish because, he's the guy. Okay. I'm not a huge Milroe as quarterback fan. I would like to see him on the team. I mean, and who knows, maybe we're wrong. I mean, but he's going to have to do better with his training, as far as throwing the football and being more confident in the pocket. But he's a playmaker and he's electric. I just don't think he's going to be the next quarterback at Alabama. I think they'll either get a transfer or it'll be Ty Simpson. And I think that he has the potential to be a great running back and maybe a slot receiver. Or maybe he's going to be like Jalen Hurts and surprise everyone, who's maybe the best quarterback in the NFL. But he's got to throw the ball better. He's got to look down the field better. He can't fumble the ball. He can't look scared. I mean, he's got a long way to go, in my opinion.
Well, let me tell you what's important for Jalen Milroe. As we get close to entering the offseason, and if Bryce Young ends up sitting out, if Milroe does end up being the guy who starts in the bowl game, that's another opportunity for him. Mm-hmm. But I think it's very important. One thing about Jalen Hurts, and there's a lot of comparisons that are worthy comparisons, that they make sense. But one thing that you always saw, I thought maybe going from freshman to sophomore, Jalen Hurts got a little bit skittish. He knew Tua Tagovailoa was, looking over his shoulder. He knew that there was a lot of pressure on him to hang on to that starting quarterback job. And I think he got very timid with the football. He was terrified of making a mistake. And that was one of the big differences between him and Tua. Tua would step out there. He was looking at everything that he could do right on a football field. And Jalen was like, let me try to avoid all these mistakes so I don't get benched. But besides that year, going from freshman to sophomore, there's never been a season that I've watched Jalen Hurts and he did not get better from the previous year.
That's true.
And Jalen Milroe, didn't see a whole lot of him as a freshman, but we got to see quite a bit this year. We might get to see more of him in the bowl game. But when he hits this offseason, you've got to step on the field in the spring and show people I'm going to work and I'm getting better at some of my deficiencies. And if he shows progress, that's where really I'll get back on the Milroe train, because I was very high on him. I still think he's got a lot of talent, but that is one key difference is you saw, Jalen, even though they were kind of sometimes the progression wasn't large jumps, it was enough where you felt confident. As long as he's moving in that direction, I feel great about it because it keeps getting better. Now he's one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL.
Right, and he didn't turn the football over. And you got to remember that. Yeah. That's the biggest difference. Milroe is a turnover machine right now, and Hurts never turned the football over. You're right. True. He was a little worried about making mistakes, but he never beat you. And Milroe just about got us beat by Texas A&M. And, he made some plays in the Arkansas game, but, I don't know. We'll see what happens. But that's a great question, and we appreciate it. Clint, thank you for staying on overtime. A lot going on. Appreciate it. What you got going on? BamaInsider.com.
A transfer portal. You got early signing day coming up. What's not going on? There's just a small lull between now and the bowl game, but it's going to be filled with a ton of just, how's your roster going to be constructed for next year? So we're going to be talking about that. We've had a great conversation. I've been going through and listening to a lot of the big name guys from other schools who are entering the transfer portal. And, some of them are just names that you recognize and where they might end up going. There's great conversation going back and forth with the posters. But then also it's some guys that maybe Alabama might take some interest in. So we've got that thread going on. We've got, the Alabama players that are entering. There's a lot of talk about that and the reasoning behind them entering and, who's behind them and all that stuff. So right now is definitely the time to be jumping on board to BamaInsider.com for sure.
Hey, thanks, Clint. Always great talking to you, bro. Great stuff, man.
Appreciate you, buddy.
That's Clint Lamb, one of the best in the business, and always great talking to him. Guys, as you hang out with us on Monday Night QB on the Bama Insider YouTube channel, like and subscribe. Give us a thumbs up. A lot going on in the transfer portal. We're going to talk more about that later on in the show when Jimmy Stein jumps on. But let's talk about recruiting, because Alabama is on fire in that category, which just seems to continue. Joseph Hastings with On3, part of our crew, jumps on each week, and it's great to see you, man. How you doing?
Mick, I'm doing excellent. This is a really important stretch for both Alabama's football team and the recruiting on the recruiting trail too. So yeah, I'm very excited about it. There's a lot going on with the transfer portal. There's a lot going on with the recruiting battles that Alabama's involved in. And yes, it's just a fun time right now, these next few weeks.
Yeah, well, let's takeaways from this weekend's official visits. Get us updated.
Yeah, so this was a really interesting official visit weekend because Alabama played host to 5 commits during the weekend and 1 target in the 2023 class. That target being Tyler Scott, and we'll start with him. He told On3 Director of Recruiting Chad Simmons that Alabama moved up his list following this visit. To Tuscaloosa, he enjoyed his time there. Really relished the opportunity to meet Nick Saban for the first time, and then also talk with Travaris Robinson. He's someone who got offered just under a couple of months ago after visiting for the Texas A&M game. At one time, I really felt that it was Auburn, Tennessee, maybe a couple of others above Alabama, but I think the Tide made up a lot of ground on this trip. It was a really important one. And you look at Tennessee, they're up there on the recruiting prediction machine. They're a program that may have slipped just a little bit. They're not going to be getting him on campus for an official visit. Auburn will be one to watch, even though they have a new staff there. Scott's thinking about taking an unofficial visit to the program this month. And then also Texas is involved, Michigan's involved, Louisville, USC. But Alabama did do all the right things on this visit here with Todd Scott. And, he's someone that we're paying close attention to. The Crimson Tide only have one cornerback commit in this 2023 class in Jaleel Hurley. There's no real layups or guarantees for them at the position. When you look at some of those other targets, you think of a Malik Muhammad, Cormani McClain, those are prospects committed elsewhere. Desmond Ricks, he seems to be trending to LSU. Damari Brown, it's going to be tough to lure him away from Miami. So Scott is one we're definitely paying close attention to. And then, official visitors, Hunter Osborne, Bray Hubbard, Yonze Pierre. Then you also have Jaleel Hurley, as I mentioned before, Raquez McKeldry. So it was mainly an in-state group of commits who were in town. They all enjoyed their time with the Crimson Tide. We haven't been able to speak with McKeldry, but the rest of them really enjoyed the time with their future teammates, future coaches, etc. Hunter Osborne did say something interesting to me, that Texas is a program that's still pushing hard for him, still trying to flip him, but he remains locked in with the Crimson Tide. So, yeah, the main takeaways from this visit from this weekend is that Alabama kind of got to re-solidify with their commitments, where things stand with them, and moved up the list with Tyler Scott.
Hanging out with you guys on the Bama Insider YouTube channel. Let me remind you, if you want the latest on recruiting, you want to know who's coming to be part of this dynasty, you want to be part of BamaInsider.com. And right now, for $10, you get an entire year. That's all the updated recruiting. That's everything going on in the transfer portal. That's the message board. And we're only going to get bigger and better. So take my word for it, $10 for a year. And maybe you just want to dip your feet in. You just want to put your toe in the water, $1 for 4 months. You can't beat that. He's Joseph Hastings. I'm Mick Gillispie, hanging out with you guys. Monday Night QB, brought to you by Westgate Luxury Condominiums. Let's look ahead to next weekend's official visits.
Yeah, so this is going to be the big one here. You got James Smith and Quay Rousseau, two prospects that we continue to talk about on a regular basis on the show, and for good reason. They're the top two recruits in the state of Alabama, priority targets for the Crimson Tide, and also Auburn's involved there. So when you have, the Auburn Tigers involved there, and then also Georgia, the rival in-state school, and then a program that Alabama is likely to meet in future SEC championship games, it always becomes more of a heightened battle when you in fact those two, and then also the Florida Gators are in that mix. But this is going to be a pivotal weekend for the Crimson Tide. It's going to be potentially the last official visit that each of these two players take. They're going to be a package deal at the next level, something that I continue to kind of you have to pinch yourself a little bit. You just don't see this. You don't see this happen where it's a guarantee that two prospects of their magnitude, their caliber, are going to be going to the same school. That's what's going to be happening here, and Alabama will look to knock it out of the park with them. Then you got Desmond Ricks. He's somebody that we haven't really talked about too much, at least in the early parts of starting the Monday Night QB segment with me, just because he was a member of the 2024 class for a period of time. But in late October, he reclassified to the 2023 class. Obviously, Alabama would love to have him in the fold with Cormani McClain committing to Miami and Malik Muhammad being committed to Texas. Ricks would be a huge addition, but the LSU Tigers are in a really good spot here. They're going to get him on campus for the final official visit, but maybe, just maybe, Bama can turn things around and get things going in their favor this weekend. And then you got Arian Carter. He's somebody that, we've been eyeing for the past few weeks. He got offered by Alabama on September 17th. I thought he may have flipped to the Crimson Tide after visiting for the Texas A&M game in October. He's decided to hold it off, take his official visits, took one to Tennessee this past weekend. Alabama is expected to be his final one. As the On3 recruiting prediction machine indicates, I really love where the Tide stand in this recruitment. I think they've been pressing all the right buttons. Nick Saban and Eric Wolford stopped by Carter's house today, did an in-home visit with him. So Alabama's in a really good spot for one of the most fast-rising prospects in the 2023 class. It's actually interesting with him. I have to point out here, he's going to be signing on December 21st, Mick, but he's not going to be announcing his decision until January 7th at the All-American Bowl. That's something you really don't see too much, but it's going to be one that we'll be paying attention to. Maybe we'll know ahead of time, but it seems like Alabama's in a good spot right now.
Be interesting to see if it gets out, right? You
Yeah.
keep a secret for a long time. Hey, look, Alabama has done a really good job of building this class, and they just added another guy. We haven't talked about this guy a lot. Sterling Dixon committed to Alabama. What does that mean?
Yeah, so Sterling Dixon, 2024 commit for the Alabama Crimson Tide. He's a product of Mobile Christian School in Alabama. You all may be familiar with that. That's where Deontay Lawson went to school. Lawson played actually a pretty important role in Dixon committing to the Crimson Tide. At one time, it was Auburn and LSU ahead of Alabama. He visited for the Iron Bowl, and that was an important one because Lawson had 9 total tackles, had a standout game, really excelled, and Dixon took notice of that, and it really helped Bama come out on top for his recruitment last week. And he's a really highly productive linebacker, fast rising player too. Jumped a bunch of spots in our latest On3 update, got to number 61 overall, had 172 total tackles last season, 18 sacks. He had a playoff game in which he had 15 and a half total tackles and 6 sacks. He's a really interesting one because I don't know necessarily where he'll project. Maybe he'll be inside linebacker, maybe he'll be outside at the jack position, but he's just really versatile, and Alabama felt like they wanted to take him at this stage in his recruitment. And if you click on that that team that on the RPM there, you get to see their 2024 class, and it is spectacular. You look at Julian Sain, top 5 quarterback in the 2024 class.
Right.
You got Jalen Mbakwe, the top-ranked player in the state of Alabama in the class. You got Perry Thompson, fast-rising wide receiver, top 10 in the state of Alabama. Bartavius Collins, a 4-star tight end, and then Dixon as well. Alabama is off to a really hot start, and it's kind of surprising because this time last year, they had no commits in the 2023 cycle. Now they have 5, number 1 overall class. Nick Saban and company continue to do it, even after a quote-unquote down year for the Crimson Tide.
Yeah, right. A down year where they lost 2 games at the buzzer.
Yeah.
and really should be in the college football playoff. I mean, but we'll talk about that a little bit with Jimmy. We kind of got into it with Clint, but anyway, coaching stops for the Crimson Tide staff. That's a big part of this.
Yeah, so I kind of mentioned it before with Arian Carter. He got to see Eric Wolford and Nick Saban today. We reported that a 5-star prospect was seen by Travaris Robinson as well. That's on BamaInsider.com. You can check that out. Some commits are being seen as well. Jalen Hale, wide receiver commit, will be seen by Saban tonight, as well as Jordan Renaud in the state of Texas there. Saban's going to make his way out to see some other recruits this week, such as Wilkin Formby and Lawson Lucky and others. Some Terrion Perkins, Ole Miss linebacker commit, was seen by Pete Golding today. There's just a lot of coaching stops going on right now. A lot of top targets being seen by the Crimson Tide. The contact period goes from December 2nd to January 28th, with a break from December 18th to January 12th, and it allows 6 off-campus in-person visits from coaches to top recruits. No more than 1 a week, but it allows 6 of them total. So the Crimson Tide are taking full advantage of it, and we expect some other top targets to be seen next week as well before early signing period.
Follow his work at BamaInsider.com. $10 gets you an entire year of Bama Insider on 3. $1 for 4 months. Joseph, thank you, man. And I got to tell you, this Cowboys continue to roll. Man, it was a beat down of the Colts last night.
It was awesome. I really enjoyed it. I mean, you look at the final scores, 54-19. We scored 33 in the fourth quarter. It's a great time to be a Cowboys fan. I know it will end with a second-round loss. That's always what happens, but I'm enjoying the ride for what it is now.
Yeah, well, good stuff. We'll talk to you next Monday, okay, my friend?
Mick, thank you so much. Take care, man.
Thank you. That's Joseph Hastings. And again, Monday Night Quarterback is brought to you by Westgate Luxury Condominiums. Like and subscribe. Hit the thumbs up as you hang out with us on a Monday for Monday Night QB, and hit the bell so you know when we're live. All right, let me bring him on, the dean of Bama Insider, Mr. Jimmy Stein. So much to talk about, Jimmy. I feel like I haven't seen you in weeks. We got this list of stuff here to talk about, but I got to start with Bama not being in the playoff. Look, I'm on with Mark and Lee this morning. I made my case here in L.A., Lower Alabama, like Nick Saban and like Daniel has alluded to in the comments section, Nick Saban went out publicly, and we love him for it because the team lost 2 games on the last play. They didn't get blown out at home by Michigan or Auburn in their rivalry game. You know, they didn't. They played a tough, the toughest road schedule, honestly, that I ever remember Alabama playing, and they lost twice. They have a reigning Heisman Trophy winner at quarterback, and if they're matched up against these teams, Jimmy, they are favorite against all of them except Georgia, and it's like this. It's supposed to be the 4 best teams. I think Alabama's one of them, and without Alabama in the playoff, you might as well go ahead and give the trophy to Georgia and start looking at 2023. That's my thoughts, but I want to hear what yours are.
Very similar, Mick. Look, I think it's a two-pronged thing. It's not just as simple as, hey, is Alabama a playoff team or not? You have to consider the other candidates too, right?
Yeah.
So in my mind, Georgia and Michigan are obviously, they will earn their way in. Undefeated conference champions in the Power 5. They're in, period. Georgia and Michigan. So 2 spots are just taken care of. Now, are there any other undefeated Power 5 conference champions? No. Well, what about 1-loss conference champions? And you do have one in TCU. So we'll put them as a maybe. What about other 1-loss Power 5 teams? Well, you got one in Ohio State. Now, what about 2-loss teams that have a good case? I see 2 in Alabama and Tennessee. So the way I look at it, Mick, is you got 2 that are certainly in, and then you have 4 that I would call maybes. My issue, Mick, is there was a rush to put TCU in.
Exactly.
And I don't understand that. Now, I say that as, hey, look, Alabama lost twice. I would even call it disqualifying. If you lose, no 2-loss team has ever been in. Let's not act like if you're a 2-loss team and you're not in, you got hosed. That's not true. No 2-loss team has ever been in. But put Alabama on the shelf and let's look at the other candidates. And my problem, Mick, and what I said on Twitter, and I was, trust me, I was basically annihilated by every TCU fan in the universe on Twitter this weekend. What I said
was, but not Mark and Lee like I was.
Exactly. Well, you just had 2. You just had 2.
I had 2. Well, really one.
A Syracuse fan. Lee's a Syracuse.
I'm just kidding. I like those guys.
Yeah, Lee's a Syracuse guy.
Good guys.
They are. No, but my point is that TCU played 9 games decided by less than 10 points.
I know.
9.
7 against backup quarterbacks. I mean, it was like, how lucky can you get?
Kansas State, let's just talk about Kansas State, who they lost to. By the way, they lost to their backup quarterback.
Right.
That was the backup quarterback on Saturday. And you're like, well, they beat them during the regular season. Kansas State was up 28-10. And TCU lost their starting quarterback, their number 2 quarterback, and had to play their number 3 and 4 quarterbacks in the game and lost. I mean, that happened. The Baylor miracle happened. Baylor's up by 2 scores with 4 minutes left, and TCU won the game. TCU only beat SMU by 8. They only beat Kansas by 7. Right. They only beat Oklahoma State by 3. There is no evidence whatsoever that TCU would have gone 10-2 against Alabama's schedule, which, by the way, today I've asked around, and I'm still researching this because it's very difficult with my limited brain power. But Alabama played 5 true road games. All 5 teams were ranked on the day Alabama played.
That's right.
I can only find one instance of that ever happening in college football history before this year. Just one time, 1992, Florida State did the same thing when they were an independent, by the way, and had to piece together a schedule. 5 road games against teams that were ranked on the day they played them. I don't understand, Mick, if we're going to have a committee who all they're doing is looking at the loss number, how many losses or, what's the number in the loss column, and that's all they're doing. Why are we paying these people thousands and thousands of dollars and putting them up in Grapevine, Texas, if all they're doing is looking at the number in the loss column, because we could get a first grade class from Gordo, Alabama to look at the loss column and count. We could get them to do that.
Right.
I'm just saying, dive into it. But in no way am I suggesting that a 2-loss Alabama team got hosed. Alabama did that to themselves. Alabama had opportunities to only be 1 loss or 0 loss, and Alabama only has Alabama to blame. But I'm with you, Mick. I don't believe that TCU is one of the 4 best teams.
Well, right. Yeah. Or Ohio State. You get blown out at home like that. I mean, losing the road schedule for Alabama was unequaled by any of the other teams. Like you said, you got to go back to Florida State when Bobby Bowden was there, and before they were even in the ACC. And part of that's luck of the draw. I mean, and it was an unlucky schedule. And, what did we talk about this before? It's the road schedule this year was the toughest road schedule since I've been around Alabama, since 1996. That's how far I go back. I've never seen anything like this. Now, you mentioned it. They could have done a lot better. They should have been a lot more creative. Woulda, coulda, shoulda. But even at that, when you look at you put it down on paper, and you're supposed to put the 4 best teams. Is it the 4 most deserving teams, or is it the 4 best teams? And Daniel in the comments section that's piping up all night, and everyone else, you're gonna miss out on good watching, because TCU's going to get blown right out of the water, and you're going to be going, man, I got to turn this off. At least if Alabama loses, Jimmy, it's always a great watch.
I agree with that totally. I'm not sold on the Danny Sheridan, who's, by the way, one of the best in the business at setting odds. I realize Alabama be a favorite over every team in this field other than Georgia or arguably Michigan. I get that. And I get that that's interesting. I also get why that doesn't carry the day.
Oh, I know.
But this is also just a fact. I mean, TV ratings, close games, people that watch the college football playoff for years, Mick, have been complaining that the semifinals are blowouts. They're not close. And I'm with you. I believe Michigan, assuming they play well, and we won't know.
It's a bye game.
They will win. I think they'll win by 14-20. I think the game will look a little like Alabama versus Cincinnati last year. Mm-hmm. And that's not to say I'm arguing Cincinnati shouldn't be in, but I am arguing anybody that watched that game should have realized Cincinnati had no real chance to defeat Alabama, even though that wasn't vintage Alabama. And Cincinnati still didn't really challenge Alabama in 2021. I think that's what this TCU-Michigan game will look like. And I think Michigan will win the game sort of similar to how they just beat Purdue on Saturday night.
I agree with you. And it's a shame that Georgia doesn't play TCU, which I'm calling the bye in this tournament, because, they had to stuff Ohio State in there after they got absolutely mauled on their own home field to Michigan. So maybe they think that we're prolonging the rematch, but I don't know. All right, let's move on. We could talk about these. Great points, though, by the way, Jimmy. I'm glad I asked you that. All right. When we got on the show tonight, we start talking immediately about Alabama players that have gotten into the transfer portal. And I mean, right before we went on, just a flurry of guys, one of the Brockermeyers, Kite's leaving, JoJo Earl's leaving, Cohen's leaving, a bunch of guys. Look, honestly, it's a lot of wide receivers and a lot of offensive linemen. And Jimmy, it's been the weak part of this team for 2 years.
Yeah, a couple of ways to look at this, of course. There are several guys, Mick, who have left who I think are good players. JoJo Earl's a good player. He's a good player at the SEC level, and he's going to be a good player wherever he lands. I think Amari Kite is a guy that has developed over time and is probably ready to be a starting good player at the FBS level. I think Kyrie Jackson, who announced a few days ago he was leaving, re-entered the portal today. I think he's a good player. But you have to look at who Alabama is going to start in their place and wonder if Alabama is now at a talent deficit. I would argue at no starting position is Alabama going to be at a talent deficit because of these guys have left? And there's also reporting at BamaInsider.com, which is the best website anywhere on the earth. There's been reporting at BamaInsider.com that says Alabama's coaches have not necessarily fought for any of these guys to stay.
Right. Yeah.
So
and I think
even though
Cohen
isn't, so it's not like these guys. Just to be completely honest, Drew Sanders left a year ago, and it's well known. This isn't a secret. Well known that Coach Saban and Alabama staff kind of fought to keep Drew Sanders.
Right.
Hey, dude, don't leave.
Yeah.
We'll even move you. We'll move you inside.
Mm-hmm.
We'll move you to tight end.
Right.
We'll move you anywhere. We don't want you to leave. You're a really good player, and we want you here.
Right.
And he left anyway, and that's fine. But I do not believe, based on our reporting at BamaInsider.com, that conversation has happened with any of these guys who are in the portal so far. And but that is not to say they aren't good players. Of course they're good players. Coach Saban and his staff found them in high school and recruited them here.
Right.
And so, of course, some of them are good players, and they'll land on their feet and do well in their new spots, wherever that ends up being. But I don't personally consider any of the guys that have left some sort of devastating news for Alabama. Two things. Alabama needs to have a big day, December 21st. Joseph Hastings talked about that earlier. Mm-hmm. Alabama's on track to sign one of its typical Saban classes, which is good news. And secondly, the portal door swings both ways. I think Alabama's got to go into the portal, pluck a couple guys out of the portal that improve the talent level in the starting lineup. And I 100% expect that to happen. A little early to have names for you guys, though there's a lot of big ones in that portal. But I believe once again, you're going to have quantity going out, but quality coming back in. And that's the way I see it.
Oh, I love it. When you say that, Jimmy, it makes me fired up because I think that Alabama is going to be super aggressive in the portal and bring in guys like Jahmyr Gibbs and Jamison Williams and, lose some of these guys that, that just aren't able to get on the football field, whether they came in with 5 stars or 3 stars. You got to be able to get on the football field with the competition. Let's talk seniors staying or going. What do you think?
Well, Emil Ekiyor today was announced this morning by the Senior Bowl. Emil Ekiyor will be playing in the All-Star game in Mobile in our neck of the woods, Mick. And I think that's great for Emil and great for the Senior Bowl. He won't be the only one. There's going to be more. What I'm interested in, Mick, is the guys that were recognized on Senior Day in the stadium before the Auburn game. Are they all leaving? Everyone would assume they are, because they were recognized as seniors on Senior Day. But yet, if you back up just 1 year, Jalen Moody came back. Kendall Randolph came back. So there were 2 guys who said a year ago, hey, we're seniors, we're done, took the flowers, took the picture with Coach Saban and their families on Senior Day in front of the whole stadium, and they came back. That could happen again with a couple of guys. Mm-hmm. But I do think I'm a big math guy in terms of math and logic and history, and you need to bet that if you were a senior on Senior Day and then you were recognized as a senior in the banquet last night that was held, a private banquet that's held for the football team and their families where different awards are given out, if you're a senior on both of those nights, you're probably not coming back. So I'm personally not believing that any senior that was recognized on Senior Day is coming back, though we know that it can happen because it just did happen this previous year. But with those guys, Ekiyor right there on your screen announced for the Senior Bowl today, I think there'll be others, whether it's Tyler Steen, Cam Latu, Jordan Battle, DeMarco Helms, Henry To'o, all of the seniors that we recognize as this is a senior player at Alabama. I'm expecting all to go, though a couple of interestings might be, how about Tyler Harrell, the transfer from Louisville, recognized at Senior Day. Haven't heard anything from him. Will he be back? Maybe. There he is with his family. Maybe he'll be back. We'll have to see. That's what makes this time period between now and the bowl practices so interesting. And then after the bowl practices, let's remember, Mick, very important information here for those that don't know how the portal works. It's open for 45 days. Alabama's going to play Kansas State about 25 days from now, right? So the portal will be open following Alabama's bowl game against Kansas State. So this is all far from being over in terms of the portal and in terms of seniors declaring for the draft. Who would have ever said that term or that phrase before COVID? Seniors that declare early for the NFL draft.
Right.
But that's what we have due to the COVID year.
Yeah, right. And that'll change soon because all the COVID year guys will be gone sooner than later. But yeah, that's right now. I mean, and you look at I got to stop right here, Jimmy. I got to throw this up on the screen. When you get a $50 super chat, you got to stop what you're doing and you got to say thank you. Sorry if you already covered this, but what position do you think Bama needs to aggressively pursue in the portal? Well, when you throw a super chat our way like that,
Yep.
then that means we stop what we're doing and we answer it. Roll Tide to you, Elizabeth.
Great question.
I think that Alabama has to go offensive line. I think they need some guys that can come in and really make an impact, big time guys. And I think wide receiver. They have to be able to throw the ball in traffic and have these guys catch it. They can't all be wide open all the time. And to me, Jimmy, I mean, those are two. The other one, and this is going to surprise some people, I wouldn't be surprised if Alabama doesn't go and get a superstar quarterback that will be in maybe for 1 year.
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, I want to shout out to Elizabeth. That's an outstanding question, particularly today with what's happening and where's Alabama going to look? Well, great question, but I'm going to start with your initial answer, Mick, and that's the offensive line. Think of this. These numbers are all off the top of my head. I don't have it in front of me, but I'm pretty sure this is true. If you take out Tyler Steen, who's expected to move on, again, a senior on senior day, Emil Ekiyor, who's already accepted a Senior Bowl invitation, and Darian Dalcourt, who was acknowledged on senior day as a senior, acknowledged again as a senior last night at the banquet. So take those three out off the roster, right? Now take out all the offensive linemen that have entered the portal. Damian George, gone. Mm-hmm. Tanner Bowles, gone. Tommy Brockermeyer today, gone. Amari Kite, gone. 4 more offensive line.
Cohen.
So now, Cohen, 5 more. So that's 5 plus the 3. That's 8 offensive linemen. You are right now, Alabama has 5 freshman offensive linemen coming in that are committed. Guys that Joseph Hastings talked about, Wilkin Formby, Miles McVay, that group. There's 5 of them. So when you add those 5, but you account for that 8 have moved on, Alabama is very short-handed in terms of older kid, veteran offensive linemen. I think it's become the biggest need that Alabama has, myself. So I firmly believe, Elizabeth, that Alabama is going to look at that offensive line. And look what Alabama did a year ago in the portal. You bring in Tyler Steen, immediate starter at left tackle, played all year, I believe, at a near all-conference level. He's likely going to Mobile and play in the Senior Bowl, be drafted in the NFL. Tyler Steen was a huge pickup for Alabama a year ago in the portal. You need to do that again. You need to go get at least a Steen, maybe more. Alabama's numbers in that offensive line are pretty thin all of a sudden.
Thank you so much again. Great super chat there. All right, let's talk Sugar Bowl now. Jimmy, when I was at Alabama, we stunk. We were like Tennessee. We were like, we were begging for a Sugar Bowl, right? We did slip into the Orange Bowl, just like Tennessee did, right? But we in 99, but we were just so bad. We just couldn't get there. And then now, this is a Sugar Bowl season, which goes to, the SEC champ, unless they're in the college football playoff. Alabama, the second highest rated SEC team. It's prestigious. Why don't we feel like that against Kansas State?
Well, because I hate saying this, although I've said it so many times, Coach Saban hasn't spoiled us Alabama fans. He's ruined us.
He is.
He's ruined us, and that's why, I remember, gosh, it's hard to believe I can remember anything. Back when I rode a dinosaur to school here, Mick, just slightly before you did. And, when I'd hitch up my T-Rex to the the horse trading post, there were T-shirts for sale in the soup store, which did still exist back then, that said Road to New Orleans, and it was all about, before the season started, it was all about what can Alabama do to get to the Sugar Bowl. This was prior to the CFP. This was prior to the BCS. This was during the old system, but the goal, the overall arching goal of the program, win the SEC and get to the Sugar Bowl. And what happened with the polls happened. That's out of our hands. That's in the hands of the voters. But it's such a strange thing to fast forward this far in my life and realize that now getting to New Orleans, now the fans are like, oh man, this stinks. Well, when I was, like I said, when I was a student, when you were a student, getting to New Orleans and the Sugar Bowl was a big thing. It's still a big thing for me. I think it's an incredible honor. It means that, hey, you're the best SEC team, the highest ranked one that's not in the playoff. And while that might sound like a consolation prize, and maybe it is, it's still a heck of an honor. This is the best conference in college football. New Orleans is an outstanding venue. So fun to go to the Sugar Bowl where you play the game, fans of both teams, everyone staying in the quarter, so much to do in the quarter, the great food, the great bars, the great culture, the New Orleans Superdome, such a big deal to us growing up on the coast, Mick, for me and you. I'm just saying that Alabama, it's a big deal.
I'm going to tell you right now, one of my best moments as an Alabama fan was I guess it was the Sugar Bowl, the national championship game against those loudmouth LSU fans, and going into the stadium, they couldn't shut up. And then 21-0. I honestly did not hear from them. I haven't heard from them since. I mean, they've won a couple games since then, but I'll tell you what, before it used to be kind of back and forth. That was one of the best times I ever had, watching Trent Richardson truck those guys and, take on the greatest college football team ever. That was a lot of fun. The games that have mattered, Alabama has played really well in this one. The games like this, though, Jimmy, that don't have a national championship on the line, let's be honest. Utah, Oklahoma, Alabama has stunk up the place.
Yeah, that's partially true, no doubt. Hey, one difference this year, this is what my ever optimist side is looking at, Mick. This year's a little different. By that I mean, look, we know there are some upperclassmen that are headed to the NFL that might not be playing in this game. Bryce, Will Anderson, we don't know yet. They haven't said, they haven't announced anything, and we're not going to announce it for them. We don't know. Right now, but there's a good chance some older kids that are headed for the draft aren't going to play. That didn't happen in 2008, didn't happen in 2013. That's new. So the point is, Mick, to me, there's going to be a lot of younger kids that have to play in this game. And I think putting a younger team on the field, I think some of those kids will really excited about playing in the game. And I think that might change the persona, might change the whole attitude of the team, having a younger team, having maybe more of the 2023 team playing in this game and not just the 2022 team playing in this game. Sort of feels like the first game of next season and not the last game of the 22 season. And that's why I think this might be a little different than that Utah and Oklahoma matchup in the Sugar Bowl in 2008 and 2013.
Yeah, I hope so. Look, I've thought about this a lot today because, I expect that, Bryce Young and Will Anderson and all these guys are going to opt out. I don't want them to. I want them to be more like Jalen Waddle, who, despite everyone in the world telling him not to play in the championship game, he did it anyway, and he's gone on to have a good NFL career. I want this to be like Alabama and Orlando in 2011, the 2010 Citrus Bowl, where they just put a beat down on Michigan State, and then it springboards the program. The thing that I thought about today, though, is that unlike then, Bryce Young's getting paid. Look, he's on more commercials than Mike Trout. like he's everywhere, right? Will Anderson, he's getting paid. Like they're getting paid now. Like this isn't, and I brought this up earlier. This isn't Tyrone Prothro, who's who's out there, who's going to make millions of dollars in the NFL, and he got hurt and he's not getting any money. I mean, these guys are getting paid, and they're getting paid to play football, whether we like it or not. And I don't know. I mean, I think that changes the game too. I mean, you take the NIL money, and I mean, don't you have to play?
Well, that's super interesting. As you know, I'll put on my lawyer hat that I took off to work full-time sports here at BamaInsider, but I still have a lawyer hat. And I'll bring up that the NIL stuff is contractual in nature. So it's nothing that we would know because those contracts aren't publicly known, or we don't know the terms of those deals. But just imagine, and here's just the lawyer in me asking, if Dr. Pepper and Fansville is saying, hey, Bryce, we're putting you in these commercials, we're giving you all this money. Our expectation is that every opportunity you have to be on TV justifies this check. So it could be that the NIL deals do force some of these kids that we guess might opt out to sort of have to play. Because again, they're being paid a lot of money by big time sponsors who expect them to be on TV, sort of pitching their brand. So could be a good guess, Mick. On the other hand, hey, it's totally understandable. As much as I would love to see as an Alabama fan, Bryce playing and Will Anderson playing in this game, if their contracts with their NIL partners don't demand it and they feel like to protect their best interests, they should sit out. I'm not going to be upset. I get it totally. And I'll always appreciate what those guys did for the program and not hold this against them. Now, kids that are going to be 4th round picks, 5th round picks, 7th round picks, and you opt out, if on the Talk of Champions message board, some of the fans are upset with you, I doubt I'll mute a lot of that. I mean, I think you need to be a high pick in the draft to say, hey, you know what? This isn't worth it for me. That's just my personal opinion.
Look, my personal opinion, Jimmy, is that Elizabeth Reed is the star of this show. A $50 super chat, that brings the total to $200. So, hey, thank you. She says she's got a drop, but Roll Tide from Dallas, Texas. Yeah, how about them Cowboys? Joseph talks about them every week. Hey, really, we appreciate it. Nothing better. Look, if it was up to me, which the Sugar Bowl's really close, right? But I'll tell you what, going out to Dallas, the Cotton Bowl, and hitting up Gillies, it's good times there too. Good times there too, right?
I've enjoyed it. I've gone to the Jerry Dome, as I call it, at least twice, and I think 3 times. I've enjoyed it. Probably, as far as other than Bryant Denny, probably the best venue I've ever watched football.
And that's coming from your heart right there.
That's absolutely true.
Because if you had no clue, you'd be like, hey, this is,
It's pretty nice.
Yeah, it's pretty sweet, right?
Yeah, I've thoroughly enjoyed it, for real. Great venue, great town. Thoroughly enjoyed every trip to AT&T and boy, where the Cowboy Joseph's Cowboys play. They scored 59 last week. Who do they think they are? Bryce Young and J-Mo and that group. 59 points in an NFL game is crazy.
Pretty insane. All right, look, we went overtime in this show, but we had so much to talk about, man. I mean, this was like a crazy Monday of things going on. Anything that I didn't ask you want to talk about before we close up shop?
Just that today was historic. This was an historic day in college football for good or for bad. That's up to people to decide. But the toothpaste is out of the tube. It's not going back. And by historic, I mean over 800 kids entered the portal today officially. 800. And it's not over. There's 44 more days of this, Mick. An historic day. It's been fun at Bama Insider. I hope members at Bama Insider and those that are listening to the show that are not members, I hope y'all enjoyed it. I started work, and by that I mean I got in front of my laptop and my phone, and I had all my information going, and I've been posting all day long about, is Alabama going to be interested in this guy? Is Alabama going to be interested in this guy? Oh my gosh, JoJo Earle might be going in. Tommy Brockermeyer might be going in. We've been doing it all day long on Bama Insider on one of the most historic days in college football history. There just hasn't been another day like this. even going back to 1880 when Yale and Harvard teed it up and played against each other back before the turn of 2 centuries ago. There has not been a day like this, but we had it covered for everyone at BamaInsider.com.
Yeah, better or worse, the sport has changed a lot.
No doubt about that. Toothpaste is out of the tube. It's not going back in either.
Wild, wild west. And it is no longer amateur. This is this pro sports, as Lane Kiffin said, without a salary cap. All right, Jimmy, great to see you. Great to see Clint, hang out with him, and Joseph, Chris Daughtry behind the scenes, always great work. And for Kyle Henderson, who puts all this together, I'm Mick Gillispie. Let me remind you guys, you're going to want to get on the Talk of Champions and hang out with Jimmy and Clint. You can do that at BamaInsider.com. $10 gets you an entire year. We're just beginning to change the face of team sites. And you're going to find that out, because you guys don't know what we know. But what I'm telling you is that this is just the beginning. The change is happening, and we want you to be part of it. So get on now on the ground floor. $10 gets you an entire year, or you just want to dip your toe in it. Hey, $1 for 4 months, BamaInsider.com. And don't forget, as you hang out with us here on the YouTube channel, like, subscribe, give us a thumbs up. Appreciate all you guys that have been hammering the comment section. The super chats. Oh, I'm so excited. It's a big night of super chats. And thank you guys for everything going on. We'll be back tomorrow with Andrew Bone at 8 o'clock to talk more recruiting. We'll talk more about this #1 recruiting class, Jersey Dolphins, Mike, Elizabeth, all you guys, man. Thanks for hanging out with us. Roll Tide, everybody. We'll talk to you tomorrow.